I'm glad that you could be here for what Sybrina and I think of as a private conversation. Think of yourself as eavesdropping on two women talking about something that truly impacted on one of their lives. Sybrina, we've chatted many times over this past year, and I don't think you ever get used to being put in this position. Why don't we start with, how are you doing? And how's your family?
I always say that I'm doing fairly well. I try to keep my head up. I try to, just get up in the morning and just live a normal day, as close to normal as I possibly can. My family is still struggling, but we're struggling together. But God is in control, and I truly believe that. He is sitting high and he's looking low. And for some purpose, he decided to use my family as an example to the world, as an example to America, that something needs to change.
It's been a year since you lost your son, Trayvon Martin, in an appalling shooting death. As you talk about your purpose, can you share with us where you were a year ago as you grappled with that profound loss versus where you are now?
I think the level of grief has not changed. My heart is still heavy a year later because I am missing my baby boy. As a parent, I still have two boys. I have one on earth and I have one in heaven. And it's very difficult to come to terms with my son not being here. It just feels like something is missing, like there is a hole in my heart for him. I know he's in heaven. I know he's resting in God's arms, but it just feels like, to me, I'm just missing him from being here, from smiling, from me taking him to school, him loving to eat cereal, just something simple as cereal. It's just unimaginable to really walk in my shoes unless you have lost a minor to senseless gun violence. It's hard and it's difficult to talk about, but I just think that it's something that needs to be done. I think people need to hear our story and know that what we're doing, what action plan we have, that we're not just going to lay down and take this easily, that we're going to do something about this and we're going to be active parents, even if in his death.
Looking at the place you're in now, I wonder what role certain emotions played in getting you there. Let's start with anger. You never come across in interviews or in one-on-one conversations as an angry woman, but you cannot tell me that you were not angry about what happened to Trayvon.
Of course I was angry, but I just deal with it in a different manner. I've always had God in my life, so I guess during my weakest hour, I leaned on God, and it really helped me, and that's what, I try to tell other people who are going through the same thing that we went through a year ago. The pain never goes away, but there are peaks and valleys in this journey, and we just feel like it's necessary. I mean, if I had known a year ago that I would lose my son, I would have told you that I would have been going crazy because I couldn't imagine me living my life or continuing to live my life without him. It's almost like I lost my arm or I lost a leg. It's just something missing on a daily basis. but we have work to do.
You know, Sybrina, you say that it's still here, and we can all understand that. It doesn't seem as if when you suffer a loss like this, you ever get over it. It's as if you figure out how to get through it. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is.
We talked about what role anger played, but what role did faith play?
Anger was present, but I didn't allow it to dominate my life. I didn't allow it to consume me on a daily basis, because anger can get in the way of your focus. My focus has always been to pursue justice for my son. So I can't allow anger or anything else to take away from my focus. So it's present. Of course it is. My son had his whole life ahead of him. And just for it to be taken away so suddenly, against gun violence, against just violence alone, it just seems like there should be an answer for what happened.
You know, a lot of women, if we really keep it real, and some men would have crawled in a bed in a ball, put the covers over their heads, and stayed in a dark room for the next year. And that would have been a perfectly valid response, because no one walks in the shoes of someone who loses a child, except another mother or father. But you turned your grief into advocacy, which is tremendously admirable. You actually became an advocate for Black families who've been touched by violence. What helped you get out of that personal grief space and try to turn it into something that would benefit others?
There were days that I did crawl in the bed and I didn't feel like I was going to stop crying. I literally cried the entire day, sometimes a few days. But it was the support of other people that really kind of helped me to go through this process. I mean, just looking back at the rallies that were held, the petition that was signed on change.org, just people that told me that they was praying for me. It was people that I met in the airport that just wanted to give me a hug, and they didn't even understand that the hug they gave me helped me. When in actuality, they were trying to, you know, they wanted to support me and everything, but it actually helped me. So the support from other people, you know, helped out a great deal. The young people came out and they did their walks and their rallies and things like that. And all of that helps. It helps a great deal to know that the fight that you're going through, you're not alone, that you're not standing by yourself, and that other people are there to support you.
You know, just before we came out, you shared with me that you never saw yourself in this place. You obviously could not anticipate what would happen to your son, but to take such a prominent role, to become an advocate, and that's the word that I choose. What word do you use?
My focus has always been justice for my son. And, you know, now that I notice that I'm trying to get justice for my son is also helping other people, I just want to do something to try to give back, because people have really been supportive of us, and I want to try to just do something to give back to other people, because the shoes I walk in is not something that they want to go through. Mm-hmm. It's something that I would say that God just picks ordinary people. Because to me, my life was ordinary. I had an ordinary job working for the housing agency. I had 2 ordinary kids. I had an ordinary job. I mean, it was nothing, you know, that I thought that would inspire other people. I mean, I just was an average person. So just to see so many people that are inspired by what I say and what I do, I mean, I haven't changed. This is the person that I've always been. I've always been a hard worker. I've always been, to me, a decent person, you know, and I really care about other people. So it wasn't too hard for me in this position that I'm in now.
It seems that God may have picked an ordinary woman to do an extraordinary thing, and we thank you.
Thank you.
We thank you.
Thank you.
You know, as we look back, Sybrina, on that night just over a year ago, looking back at the facts that you know and accept, because you know we don't accept a whole lot of them.
That's right.
What do you actually think happened that night?
I think my son was minding his own business. I don't believe he had any bad intentions. I believe that he was just trying to make his way back from the store. And he was distracted by somebody that had, I would say, different intentions or ill intentions, and followed him and may have chased him. And Trayvon is not an aggressive person. He is very playful, always smiling, affectionate, and I just believe that this person tried to detain him or tried to be the police officer, and Trayvon just didn't see that. And I think that a confrontation ensued, and as a result, he was shot. But I believe that if George Zimmerman had remained in his vehicle and didn't chase him and didn't follow him, he would be here today.
Just making that choice to stay in his vehicle would have prevented a confrontation and prevented a tragedy. What role do you think perception and misperception played the night of Trayvon's death?
I'm going to speak for Trayvon first, and I'm going to say that this was a strange person to Trayvon. Trayvon, by Florida law, was a minor. This adult male should have been thinking in an adult capacity, and he should not expected a minor to automatically know who he was or assume that he was the neighborhood watch. And I believe that our kids, our children, our nieces, nephews, cousins, friends have a right to walk in peace. Without being followed, without being pursued, and without somebody assuming that their intentions are negative because of the color of their skin, because of a hoodie, because of they might seem to you suspicious.
George Zimmerman's perceptions or misperceptions of Trayvon more than likely led him to make certain assumptions. What always struck me as interesting is no one ever put themselves in Trayvon's shoes to figure out what he was thinking, that he might have been in fear of this fool following him. What about the police and the perceptions and misperceptions that night?
I think the police had already made a decision based on the connections that they had with George Zimmerman, that whatever he said, regardless of the situation, that he was going to be right. They had an unarmed minor on the ground with no weapon, and you had this adult male, neighborhood crime watch, wannabe cop, that pursued him. So whatever story he said, the police accepted. And that is definitely an issue as well.
The dynamic of accepting George Zimmerman because he looked like them, had relationships like them, was familiar to them. In contrast with Trayvon, who didn't look like them, was not familiar to them, did not have connections to them. Do you see that as an ongoing problem as it relates to young black men?
That could be a problem because it goes back to what you said about perception. And if a person perceives that you are violent or you are a criminal, they're going to make all kinds of assumptions in their head, which are not necessarily valid. But because it goes back also to your background and how you were raised, it has a lot to do with your perception. One thing that I remember is a lot of people have issues with police officers. But in my eyes, police officers were there to protect and serve. My dad was a police officer. And so I based my opinion about police officers based on him. And to me, he was a good guy. He wasn't the bad cop, because of course there's some good cops and some bad cops. He was, to me, the good cop. He respected people. People respected him. So a lot of times it's about how you were raised. It's about your background. It's about maybe your class of growing up, your status growing up, and just the things that you were exposed to. If you have never seen police officers doing anything positive, then you're going to have a negative perception of police officers. I just personally had at the time a good perception of police officers. And based on my age, I should know a lot more about officers. But I didn't have any problems with police officers. I didn't have any situations with police officers until the Sanford Police Department.
Now let's switch the hats, because you had a positive image of police. Do you think that the police shared that same image of a young African-American man? I know it's a rhetorical question, but they brought in their own perceptions, what their experience had been in the past.
I don't think they looked at my son as a human being. I don't think they looked at my son as a minor. I don't think they looked at my son with respect to the crime that was committed and the severity of what happened. Right now, we're looking at if a man is going to jail or not. I don't have that choice anymore with my son. He's not alive, so I don't have an option. When somebody commits murder, it's final. And that is the process that I'm going through now in my mind to try to get through what has happened.
Sybrina, what about the whole question of race and how it became the central issue as it relates to Trayvon's death, George Zimmerman being the one that caused the death, the police officers not arresting George Zimmerman, and the public outcry that came afterwards?
I think certainly race played a part. I would be naive to think that he didn't look at my son and already form an opinion based on the color of his skin. That's a given. But I think there are several different issues, not only the race issue. He was wearing a hoodie, which is another issue that deals with your article of clothing. I have an issue with the Sanford Police Department playing judge and jury and deciding at the scene that they're not going to arrest him. I feel like just like George Zimmerman has rights, my son as a victim has rights.
It seems as if the perception or the misperception continued even after Trayvon's death. I was particularly perturbed as an attorney and as a black woman to see, and even I can say saddened and frustrated, to see what I kind of perceived as a rush to judgment about this particular young man, from the pulling of his school records to talking about alleged drug use to pictures of him from his social media pages looking gangster, as they would say. You know, the public and the news media decided who Trayvon Martin was based on a perception or a misperception. Did you get that same level of frustration?
I got a level of frustration because they assumed who he was because he had a hoodie on. Mm-hmm. They assumed who he was because he had a T-shirt on. I mean, it was just so many different things that they wanted to try to justify what had happened.
How do you put up with that? I mean, you have this wonderful measured tone to you. And not to put too fine a point on it, you're a better woman than me. Okay? And I would venture to say a whole lot of sisters in this room, okay? But, okay, that given, we can't just go off and act a fool. You had to put up with the public and the media telling you who your son was when you knew different.
It was difficult. I mean, they said so many things about him that at one point I didn't even know they was talking about him. I mean, some of the things that they said was, you know, so far left that I didn't even know that they was talking about my son. Mm-hmm. The person that lived with me, the person that I gave birth to. Mm-hmm. You know, you talking about my baby, you know, so I have my bad days. Make no mistakes, I do have my bad days. And
thank goodness the cameras aren't
right.
around. You know, you brought up the hoodie a couple of times, and it became sort of this universal expression for young people of solidarity with Trayvon. And just start with, what was your reaction to the whole conversation about the hoodie? It was an article of clothing.
Well, initially, as a mother, I used to tell him all the time to take the hoodie off as a mother. But now that the hoodie symbolizes unity, it connects the young people, it connects the older people, and it just symbolizes the Trayvon Martin movement. It symbolizes the injustice that continues to go on. It just symbolizes so many things that I have gotten used to the hoodie. Even for his 1 year anniversary of his death, I put on a hoodie. So I'm supporting the movement.
You know, Sybrina, it also symbolizes hypocrisy, because I can recall very distinctly having a conversation very soon after your son's death about the hoodie on Trayvon Martin representing a so-called gangster lifestyle, but the same hoodie on Mark Zuckerberg the day he was supposed to be going public with his billion-dollar corporation representing success and wealth. What was the difference?
The color of his skin.
Well, What's the reaction of people? I feel the love in this room when you appear in public.
It's still hard for me because I still think of myself as an average person, an average mom, just doing what I can for my son. I mean, I can't stop because he's deceased. Mm-hmm. I can't stop because he's in heaven. It just opened my eyes about some other things that I need to do in addition to. Because I have a son, my oldest son, that's in college right now, and I have to fight for him. I have to fight for the Trayvon Martins that have already happened in this last year, for the Trayvon Martins that potentially may happen. So I have to fight for those people. I have to stand in the gap for those people. And I can't say that it is a honorable job. I can't say it's a job that I signed up for. I didn't interview for it. But I'm dedicated to this cause, and I'm dedicated to what I need to do for my kids as well as other people's kids. I see the vision, and I see the purpose, why it's needed and why it's necessary.
Thank you. You approached that question from the position of a mother. As a parent, did you ever feel judged, especially in the beginning when people were made aware of Trayvon Martin and the shooting death? Judged as a parent, judged as a mother, judged as a human being?
Yes. There was one individual that came to mind that worked for the same company, Miami-Dade County, that I work for, that said Trayvon Martin's parents have to be on welfare. That hit me hard.
Wasn't he getting the same check that you were getting?
Same check, same company, and it just hurt for people just to assume. I mean, at that particular time, I had been on my job over 20 years. Tracy had been on his job for over 20 years. I mean, we are working parents. We are not, just sitting around for a handout, and for somebody who worked at my same job to say that was a disgrace.
You mentioned Tracy, and he's not with us today, but he has been by your side and really been an example of a black man that has responsibilities and took those responsibilities on his shoulder. And I'd like to just give a hand clap for Tracy. Sybrina, I know you all have talked, so he had to also feel the pressure as a black man, as a father, because often African American men as fathers are cast in the negative light. Can you share some of those thoughts with us?
Some of the same things was happening to him. I mean, people were just saying so many negative things about us, and they didn't know us.
He was put under a microscope as a black man. Is he there for his son? Was he there? Is he there for her? Were they married? All of these kinds of intrusive and inappropriate questions when a parent has lost a child.
I just really think some individuals don't understand. And it's easy to say something negative to someone that's hurting or that's in pain. But it takes real character to say something positive to somebody that's in pain, to help them.
It's fair to say, and it's a sad statement, that young black men have been killed before Trayvon. And certainly young men who passed away afterwards in this last year. For instance, Jordan Davis, who was shot in his own car for playing music too loud. I think his mom's going to be here. Okay.
She's here.
Lucy's in the house. Lucy's in the house. Sending you love. You and your family love.
As I think back, I can honestly tell you, when I heard about Trayvon's death, I was very selfish. All I could think about was my nephew. He was the same exact age. He just turned 18 in November. Same exact age. I think all women saw their sons, their grandsons, their nephews. Even the President of the United States said, when I think about this boy, I think about my own kids. If I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. Why do you think Trayvon's murder captured our hearts in the way it did?
I think because there was not an arrest. I think that really pissed people off to hear certain parts of what happened, because I don't believe we're ever going to know exactly what happened. But just to hear certain parts of what happened, and for them to not arrest the person that did that, and for him to just be able to go home and sleep in his bed, and we had to bury 17-year-old child. I think that's part of what really triggered it. I think, too, the other part was a lot of people were just fed up with our black males continuing to be shot and killed and no justice served.
It was almost as if his death created a tipping point, sort of that a line from the movie Network, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore. And do you think that people sort of woke up and said, I'm mad as hell and we're not going to take this anymore? And in some ways it has started to change perceptions of the way young black men should be treated, especially by our criminal justice system.
I think it certainly opened some eyes. I think it certainly had a lot of conversations going. I think it certainly brought light to the injustice, to the stand your ground law, and how we are treated as a race. I think it brought it to the attention of what was actually happening, because a lot of people in their own world thought that we was receiving justice. And what does justice look like to them? They had no clue. So sometimes things need to be brought to the forefront for you to actually see things in black and white.
I'm curious, did you, as a black mother of 3 boys,
Two
boys, did you ever have to have the talk with them, you know, the black mama talk that says, this is how you deal with police, make sure you put your hands on the wheel of the car, if you're ever stopped while driving while black, yes, say yes, sir. All of the things that I don't think that white parents worry about when they send their children out. Did you have that talk with your boys?
I had that talk with my boys, but like I said, Trayvon grew up around a police officer, which was his grandfather. So of course he's going to respect a police officer. The person that was following him was not a police officer. So it's a difference. You know, maybe in his mind he thought he was a police officer, but Trayvon did not perceive him as a police officer.
And he wasn't.
And
Let's just be
perceived
clear.
him as a stranger, as somebody that was following him in the dark.
it seems to me that Trayvon's perceptions were correct. He was a stranger, he was not a police officer, and he was following him in the dark. So if we talk about perceptions, Mr. Zimmerman's were the ones that were off that night, not Trayvon's. His were right on point. We're going to move into sort of the legal question and the foundation questions. But before I ask Ben Crump and Michael Skolnick to join us, can you speak just for a minute to all the parents of young black men today? What would you tell them about this conversation that we're having about perceptions and misperceptions in the context of losing your son? Bearing a child is the worst position that any mother could be in. We want to try to avoid it in the future.
I would simply tell them to be cautious, to love their children unconditionally, through the good, through the bad. I would tell them to make sure prayer is in the home, because it helps a great deal. And it's the driving force that helps me. I would tell them that although we may perceive someone a certain way, they may be looking back at us in a different light. But I would just tell them to be who they are, to love life and to love themselves and to love God.
Sybrina, I have to tell you, I speak for a lot of people, and I think everyone in this room. We admire you, and although we are so woe to say thank you, because we would not place this burden on you, we're grateful for your advocacy. We're all very, very grateful. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I go.
Nope, you're going to stay, and Ben's going to come. Thank you. They're going to bring the chairs, and we can one here and one there. There we go.
Hold on. We need to move your chair back just a little.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Counselor?
Attorney?
Colleague. And will you please introduce Kim, who is here on the stage?
Yes, I'm Attorney Benjamin Crump. I have the honor of representing Trayvon Martin's parents, Sybrina Fulton and Tracy Martin, who's working and wish he could be here with you today. And this is Ms. Kim McCray, the Executive Director of the Trayvon Martin Foundation, who's done an incredible job thus far.
Wonderful. Absolutely. Thank you. Kim, I just have a couple questions just so that the audience is aware. You all have set up the Trayvon Martin Foundation, and as I've reviewed what the purpose is, we've talked about this, it's both criminal justice minded and family focused. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is fair to say. You know, it's interesting because the family had a choice to make, and that choice was if they remained silent and no one knew what happened, they could have been selfish and said, you know what, as long as justice is served for our son, we're okay. But that is not the decision that was made. And so on behalf of the advocates, they decided to say, you know what, with this grief, we don't want another family to go through what we've gone through. And to have to be a part of her life and Tracy's life every day, I'm the one that deals with them on a daily basis. And it's so hard. And when you think about being an advocate for families, unfortunately, Trayvon isn't the last. And it is unfortunate. But the good part about the foundation is we are going to be there for other families.
You have sort of three prongs, and Attorney Crump, help me out to make sure I get it correctly. Justice advocacy,
Yes.
family advocacy, and conflict avoidance.
Yep, conflict resolution, yes.
Absolutely, and they try to start to what actually happened with Trayvon. You want to teach young people how to deal with conflict resolution, and with the senseless gun violence that's running rampant in America, you really want them to try to say, instead of resorting to violence, let's resort to using our heads to solve problems. Let's use diplomacy. And that's important because think about what happened on February 26th. How many things could have happened differently to where Trayvon Martin wouldn't have been shot in the heart that night? If George Zimmerman would have been the adult and said, I'm the neighborhood watch, would have identified himself, if he would have stayed in the car and waited for the police to come, if he would have tried to respect Trayvon as a person, if the Sanford Police Department, as Sybrina so eloquently said, would have said, we're ordering a blood and alcohol analysis on a dead black kid on the ground, and we're not gonna order a drug and alcohol analysis on the shooter who's holding the proverbial smoking gun in his hand. Mm-hmm. We're gonna run a background check on Trayvon Martin dead on the ground. We're not gonna run a background check on the killer. Mm-hmm. And it's so many things like that could have happened differently. And none of it did. So part of the foundation is to try to make sure we can avoid these things so it doesn't happen to anybody else's child, and to keep pushing, as you said, the justice. The Stand Your Ground law is just sending a terrible message, especially for little black and brown boys. It's a terrible message. Ask Jordan Davis' parents, ask Kewan Barry parents, and countless of others, minority children who have been killed since Trayvon, and their killers say, stand your ground.
Well, aren't we blessed that this is the first time in 8 years that no new Stand Your Ground laws have been enacted in this last year? Can you update us on where the case is? Understand that we don't want you to prejudice the case in any little bit, even though I know you wouldn't. Tell us what you can tell us, and we'll respect what you can't.
Yes, ma'am. Just a brief update. Today, in fact, we now know that the Stand Your Ground hearing that Zimmerman's lawyers were requesting, they have waived that. And it is very interesting because the Stand Your Ground hearing would have required, as most lawyers would know, that if you're going to assert any kind of self-defense, your client has to take the stand. And so if he would have took the stand and, God willing, that Stand Your Ground motion been denied, then he would have to take the stand again in his trial, because it's asinine to think that you can make a self-defense argument and you don't take the stand. And so that was the big thing that Sybrina has, the faith of a mustard seed. She said, Attorney Crump, there's not going to be a Stand Your Ground hearing, and she was right. So that was a big victory, but the biggest victory, I think, was the judge saying, we're not going to continue this trial, stop, because a lot of times, I believe they try to just continue to try, hope that you all forget. As Dr. King said, justice delayed is justice denied. And what the judge said is, we're not going to continue this trial. We're going to have this trial on June 10th. And that's what Sybrina and Tracy have been saying. Please don't let them sweep our son's death under the rug.
Let me just explain user-friendly terms. Let's first start with Attorney Crump said that he would have had to take the stand twice. If he was going to assert Stand Your Ground in the Stand Your Ground hearing, he'd actually have to verbally say that on the witness stand under oath, subject to cross-examination from the prosecution. If, in fact, it was denied, then we go to trial. He would have to retake the stand, and the prosecution would then have his previous entire statement to go after him yet again when he took the stand that second time.
Absolutely.
It's the best case scenario because folk don't tell the same lie, they keep messing it up all the time, okay? I guess that's probably my job to tell it in a user-friendly sort of way. And continuances are lawyers' ways to say, I'm not ready to go to trial yet. And the court said, well, you better get ready because it's going to be in June.
Amen.
All right? What do you think the case is going to turn on?
Well, you know, a lot of people, and God, you live with these cases as Attorney Phillips and other lawyers know, you really live with these things. And they keep trying to say who the star witness is. And they try to make it the witness on the phone. They try to make it this here. I think this case is going to turn on the killer's words. He's given so many accounts and contradictions that contradict the physical evidence of this case. I think if the jury just listen to the evidence, don't take my word for it, don't take his lawyer's word for it, listen to that 911 call where he says, oh, and he says a bad word, I'm getting away, and he starts pursuing Trayvon, and then the 911 operator said, are you pursuing him? He says, yes. She said, I don't need you to do that. And then he tries to change out of that because remember, this stand your ground law, if you're pursuing, if you're the aggressor, then you can't, it's common sense. You can't follow somebody and shoot them in the heart and say, I'm standing my ground.
Right.
It makes no sense. So I think this case, there's all the evidence in the world to convict Trayvon's killer if the jury follows the evidence. Now, whether that happens, we don't know, and that's going to be the question. Emmett Till, 60 years ago, all the evidence in the world, and nobody's held accountable for his death. We fast forward to 2013 now, Star. How far have we come in America in the matter of equal justice?
Well, we'll see, won't we?
Absolutely.
Sybrina, I'm actually curious if you all can share this question here. Are you concerned about the public perception and the media's way of casting this upcoming trial? Because we can screw it up all the time by running our mouths in ways that we don't know what the hell we're talking about, honestly. Like so many legal cases before it, they often get tried in the media before they get tried in the courtroom.
Yeah.
Are you concerned about that at all?
I'll let Sybrina go first.
I'm not really concerned about that because I think the evidence and the testimonies will speak for itself. I think once the jury is presented with all the evidence, the seen and unseen, that they will make a decision based on the information they have. I don't think the media is going to persuade them. I do think people have their own opinion about which side they're on, but that was a minor, that was an adult, and you have to kind of put yourself in somebody else's shoes.
Ben, does that bother you that it has been divided into this side or that side? Are you on MSNBC or are you on Fox? Do you believe what Zimmerman said? Do you support Trayvon and his family?
Yeah, you know, Star, I think it's two things, and you as a lawyer, you can appreciate this because you were a prosecutor, so you saw it from a different advantage than Attorney Phillips and myself. But I think the first premise is this here. There are no rights that George Zimmerman should have that is greater than the rights for Trayvon Martin to live. I mean, I have never seen a killer of an unarmed child get so much consideration. I mean, the
Defense funds and all kind of stuff.
I mean, it's unbelievable to me that, you know, he gets all this consideration, whether you look at the bond hearing and the second bond hearing.
The wife lying about where the money was. I remember everything.
It's so much stuff. When you think about the fact, all the consideration he was given on February 26th, that whatever he said was just the gospel. I mean, forget that he got a gun and there's a kid on the ground. Whatever you say, we're going to take as the gospel. It's just unbelievable. And then you fast forward and you do think about all the money raised for the defense and stuff, because we've been doing this a lot. I haven't seen many people get a lot of money to have a defense. I think the public defender, you might get $5,000. Well, he's gotten far more than that. And then you come down to just the basic point of what Thurgood Marshall said. And I think this is really what it's about when you get cut to the chase. Justice Marshall said that the basis of the American Constitution is simply this, that a black child born to the poorest, most uneducated, most inarticulate black woman has the same exact rights as a white child born to the wealthiest, most affluent, most educated white woman, just by virtue of being born in America. He said, I know that's not the case in America, but I dare anybody to say that's not the goal worth fighting for. And to conclude, that's what makes America great. By uplifting, making sure Trayvon Martin get the same equal justice that George Zimmerman would have gotten if the shoe was on the other foot. And just imagine that for a second. Imagine Trayvon Martin shooting unarmed George Zimmerman. Now just imagine how this case would have been different. Would they ever have gotten George Zimmerman's social media would they ever got his school records? Yeah. You know, would they be asking these questions? But when it's our kid on the street
would Trayvon Martin have a defense fund?
It's a double standard. You know, would they have raised $350,000 to defend a black boy for killing an unarmed person? I mean, it's just so many stark contradictions of our concepts of justice. And I'll shut up there because you do get passionate and you say, wow, I want my little black accused defendant to get the same consideration. Go in any courtroom in America and see if any people from our community get that kind of treatment.
Well, I am really supportive of your efforts for the foundation, obviously for the trial. Sybrina, you and Tracy and your family have our love and our prayers. I know there are some questions here in the audience, and we will be able to take some time to address some of your questions. I'll ask you, when you pose your question, to pose it as a question and to keep it brief, please, so that more people can participate. Are there any questions? Okay, yes, sir. Oh, yes, ma'am, sir.
Hi, thank you so much. You are such a graceful woman, Mrs. Fulton. It's an honor to hear you, as painful as it is to hear you. And I wanted to know have you considered what you would do if Zimmerman is acquitted? What you considered what we should do if he's acquitted?
One of the things that we supported and we rallied around and we asked for was the arrest. We have the arrest. Now our focus is on a conviction. If we do not get a conviction, we will be disappointed, but we will let the justice system speak for the case. We will not have an appeal process. There is basically nothing we will be able to do at that point but try to help somebody else. I mean, we're going to do as much as we can and exhaust all our options, given the chances that we're getting the court system, and just hopefully the court system won't send such a negative message that you can pursue someone, run him down, chase him, follow him, pick a fight with him, shoot him and kill him, and say, I was standing my ground. So a lot of people are aware of what's going on, and that would be a horrible message to send out.
I would just say this. We've all asked everybody to not try to take the law into their own hands if the jury, for whatever reason, was to exonerate Trayvon's killer. And I think Attorney Star Jones, I know y'all know, is a great commentator. She's a former prosecutor. She can tell probably whether the state will appeal or not. We have no control, and That's the one thing. It's the state of Florida is the only person who can put people in jail. And that's the hardest thing, I think, Star, of watching Mr. Martin. He feels powerless. He can't do anything when he's in the courtroom with the killer of his child.
Right. The victims of crime in our country have to rely upon the prosecution, the state or the federal prosecution, to really speak for them in a criminal case. The recourse is a civil lawsuit. Zimmerman does not have deep pockets, but you could prevent him, if you wanted to go after him later, from making any money from Trayvon's death. Also, we have to also remember that the Trayvon Martin Foundation is in place specifically so that other families will have the resources and the support necessary should they find themselves in a situation that they're going to have to go into a courtroom. And so you wouldn't be starting from scratch because you would have the resources of this young man's life and his family who have walked in the shoes before you have.
And I think that's the real positive thing when you think about it, is because of what Sybrina and Tracy have done, no matter what happens in court, because we don't want to make it about his killer. We want to remember his life and what his parents did to uphold the legacy of his life. That's what we can control. We can control that if it happens to any other our children, we got an advocacy group in place now to stand up and say, what happened to Trayvon is not going to happen again. And as Star said, it's a huge victory. Let's don't take it for granted that no new stand your ground laws were passed in any state. That's a huge victory. And you all should be applauded, because what that says is in those states, if another little black or brown boy is shot, their killer can't say stand your ground like in the first 25 states. And ALEC and a lot of other special interest groups, because of the advocacy of Sybrina Fulton and Trayvon Martin and you all putting on those hoodies, they have been exposed to say, you can't be doing this kind of crazy enactment of laws that so disproportionately affect our children. I mean, you all really don't know just what you did by standing up for Trayvon, how positive it has been.
I agree. Yes, sir.
My name is Eric Clayette, and I thank you for your words, all of you. As it relates to talking to folks, are there concrete things that you would like to see, certainly black men do in our communities as it relates to working with our boys and our daughters? As a father myself, I'm always concerned about, I don't know that I would respond as has been responded, should something had happened to my daughter. I think I would have been beyond irate, and I'm sure you are too. But again, as Ms. Jones has pointed out to you very nicely, you have a nice temper in terms of how you present things. But I would also like to know, are there concrete things that you think that we can do specifically in terms of working with our kids? And secondarily, I just want to give each of you my cards, because I think there's a foundation that I'm affiliated with that would like to give you all some support. So may I do that?
Sure.
Thank you. We need help.
We want that.
And if I may,
Thank you. And I'm going to introduce you to Michael Skolnick, who's a board member. And one of the purposes of the Trayvon Martin Foundation coming and participating is so that they can reach out to other resources within our community and other influencers, so that you can say what resources are available. So
yeah, and I would like to add to that, your question. One of the things is, as Star mentioned, we are a very, very new foundation. I mean, less than 1 year old. So for us, tonight is so, so important, because as you said, there are foundations that we are here to partner with and to be able to start some collaboration. We don't know everything. We won't profess that we do, but we know that there are a lot of great organizations out there, and mentoring is part of the things that both Sybrina and Tracy would like to see done. Over the summer, we want to start a mentorship program, and we talk about conflict resolution. We talk about things like that. We talk about making sure that our young people know what their rights are. We want to make sure that it is important that they start to see other young people within the community doing the right thing, but as a black male, as a father, as a brother, as a husband, as a neighbor, it is important that they now start to see your faces and that you are part of what we're doing. So this summer is something that we want to start with, that type of pilot program. So anyone that's here and you know that you have a very successful mentoring program, I would love to speak with you because collaboration is going to be the key to our success.
Thank you.
And I got to say this, because you asked a specific question, Star. You do something. I have to tell you all the story of the young people. It is tremendous to me when people say, oh, we can't make a difference. That's a lie. You know, it was a Howard University college student who started the petition for Trayvon Martin Star and got 2.2 million people to sign just because he said, I gotta do something. He had no idea what he was doing, but he said, I gotta do something. The Million Hoodie Rally was started by a young person here in New York City, hundreds of miles away from Tampa, Florida. We came, I'm not ashamed to admit it, I didn't even know what a hoodie rally was when the first one happened and stuff. But it's these young people and doing something, so you just have to do something. I think about what Michael Skolnick said about Jordan Davis. The fact that so many people stood up for Trayvon, they had to acknowledge Jordan Davis when his killer started saying he was standing his ground too. You know, and we got to know Jordan's name, and he got an arrest right there. And that's progress. So you just got to act and you got to do something.
And Ben, if you can talk to them about the amendment as well. We do have a Trayvon Martin amendment this legislative session as well.
Yeah, and that's the other important thing. Social media and blogging. What we don't do enough of, Star, and you're in the media, and I understand now the media is influenced by what people put on social media in the comments. We got to blog on the newspaper articles because they look at how many people commented to decide whether we're going to keep working on the story or not. And we're talking about black male image reimagined. If a lot of people saying negative stuff about our black males, then we got to have a lot of people going on the newspaper website saying a lot of positive stuff because they'll tear down Trayvon, they'll tear down Jordan, they'll tear down your child.
Yes.
So we got to go and we got to get active and do something. This social media is powerful. Blog, tweet. If you have an opinion, you see some foolishness said about a young black person, say something. Don't be silent.
I was going to actually ask Michael, as you sit here as the CEO and editor-in-chief of Global Grind, which has really done yeoman's effort in this regard. I want to say thank you for your work. And what role do you see the media playing as we ramp up for this trial? And how do we help you support Sybrina and Tracy and their family?
I think this will be the trial of the year. I think there'll be a tremendous amount of media attention on this case. I think a lot of folks have said that there is less attention a year later amongst the media and amongst people who have supported the family. I would tend to disagree. I think there's just as much attention now as there's ever been. I think it just ebbs and it flows. I think come June 10th, I'll be in Sanford. I think we should join the family in Sanford if we can. If we have the resources to go down there and support them. But CNN has told us they'll be there every single day. I think from our standpoint, from Global Grind, we took a stand. And we're not ashamed of it. We believe in justice for Trayvon, and we're going to stand by that. We believe in his innocence, and we're going to stick by it. So I think to Ben's point, it wasn't until folks took to their own form of media. I see FH Supreme here from Chicago, who's been an amazing advocate, not just for Trayvon, but for so many people around the country, that we made traditional media pay attention to this case. I think we got to continue to do that.
Sadly, thank you very much, Michael. Sadly, our time has come to a conclusion. I really encourage you all to come back tomorrow for the remaining portions of our program. As you can see, there are some real issues being discussed and some real solutions being proposed. It's going to be a very interesting day tomorrow, and we need all of your participation. Sybrina, thank you again. Thank you to Tracy in absentia. Thank you to Ben Fry. Thank you to Kim. Thank you to everyone who put this together.